Hi, this is Biovante Best Practices Exchange webinar today. We're very happy you've joined us. Our goal is to have experts share their experiences and industry knowledge to better inform you of current topics. And by fielding your questions, we hope to better inform ourselves of your questions and concerns. So my name is Chris Masters. I'm co-owner of Biovante. Biovante is a biological-based ag business. We focus a lot on seed treatments, in the row applications with biologicals, soil applications with our biologicals, as well as post-emerge applications with some of our other products. We work with growers to design programs based off of their current equipment, their needs, what they're looking for, whether it's dry land or irrigated environments. And then at the end of the year, we want to look and see how that progress played out throughout the year. So once again, we thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited about moving through the topics and the speakers that we have today. Hopefully you can obtain some of the information and use that as a practical resource for your farming operation. Today I'm joined with Jeff Burton. Jeff is with AutoProbe, AutoProbe Technologies. And a really unique situation, Jeff, that's going on with being able to collect data. Jeff, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and give some background.
Yeah, sure. So grew up on a farm in northeast Arkansas, 3,000 acre, basically corn, soybean, and produce operation, fourth generation. We got out of day-to-day farming in the mid-90s and allowed for us to start looking at where things are going with GPS and precision. And my real background is that of being the son of the inventor of this machine.
So you got perks.
I get a couple of perks here and there. I like to tell people that I'm the grandson of an engineer and the son of an engineer, and they beat the engineer out of me before so I'm not an engineer. But came up with saw the need for soil sampling improvements from day-to-day farming, and that's what led to the creation of the AutoProbe. I moved on to a business development career in the internet industry in California, and when we got patents on this, moved back to Arkansas and took over.
So when did the company actually get started? When did it, was it concept, and then when did it start to actually become reality?
So the concepts basically started late 90s, and kind of the big aha moment of how this machine worked happened in 2000. There was several reiterations that were made of the machine, just with my father working on his own. And in 2006, we were able to raise our first round of capital and take it from a machine that was built in a shop to an engineering firm in Iowa that allowed us to take this to something that looks like something you can buy from a John Deere dealership.
So obviously it looks pretty fierce. I mean, it looks like this is going to do some work. How does this really perform? How does it operate?
So as I said, the aha moment, as you're looking at this picture, that track is a ground-driven track. It's being pulled behind in this instance, a 5000 series John Deere tractor. What happens is when you put that on the ground is driving it. And again, aha was, if you ever look at a track machine, that cleat stays in the same place on the ground, right, as the machine rolls over, moves over. So the aha was, wait, if that stays in the same place, that will give us the opportunity to push a probe into the ground and pull it up out of the ground before the track comes back up off the ground.
Right.
So we, with that, there's 17 feet around that track. We put 2 probes on it. It allows you to pull a core every 8.5 feet. We like to discuss or kind of talk about it in the form of grid sampling, just because it's as a standard, but it's you can use it in grid, zone, any type of sampling. But on a 2.5 acre grid, we're going to pull 40 cores as you're traversing that area of ground, as opposed to typically some guy pulling 4 or 6 and maybe at best 10 or 12.
So let's talk about practicality. Let's say there's a 40 acre field. And we have GPS coordinates for the field. How does this data get uploaded into to where we know that these samples specifically came from?
Yes, yes. So the operator shows up in the field. Typically, they have a boundary with them already. If not, we can draw the boundary or draw it typically instead of driving. But 9 times out of 10, we always have the boundary. Gentleman shows up or your grower shows up, puts up his grid or whatever zones he's going to go through, takes off across the field. Again, just to stick to the 2.5 acre sample or example, it takes about 45 seconds to go from one end of that grid to the other. So we're pulling 40 cores and combining that into one composite sample in the cab. That's happening up in the cab. So the soil's being delivered in the cab next to the operator. And as he crosses a boundary line, the machine changes to the
actual physical structure of the soil is being delivered in the cab.
It is. So if you you imagine a combine driving through the field and you got a steady flow of corn or soybeans or whatever, it's very similar from the standpoint of you have a steady flow of soil.
Yeah.
That's coming into the cab, and it's engineered to where little dust can get somewhat dusty if it's really, really dry, but there's been over a decade of engineering and refinement into this product, and we're just now really starting to bring it to market.
So this is a go-to-market product.
Exactly. We've spent since 2008 until about now working with some large ag retailers and others that allowed us a really large footprint to go out and I don't know about yourself, but everybody I ever talk to, they say my soil's different, or it's different where I'm from and we came up against that when we first started. So we said, well, let's just go as much everywhere as we could. So we've sampled over 600,000 acres with it to date, and with the technology and about 22 different states.
Okay, awesome. Well, so Jeff, how has the precision changed the demands placed on the soil? And then with that, how have sampling techniques evolved to meet this need?
Well, that's a good question. So as far as how they've probably evolved, as far as how they've evolved,
basically from where we were
is
now.
As a guy doing, going out and doing it by himself or hiring somebody to do it, they're pulling 4 to 6 cores by hand with a hand probe. Anybody that's ever been on the end of a
either bent it, broke it, jumped on it.
You're talking about their back or their probe?
Well, that's it. Yes.
So all of the above. It's a very laborious task, and it's one where quality falls off pretty quick. So, and it was what was the foundation of doing this or creating this machine, is to be able to have an accurate, consistent quality sample that's the same every single time. And then, with GPS and everything that we have now available to us, we can take you back to that same spot the next year or 2 years.
Sure.
And, you're going to really be able to compare apples to apples, as opposed to, well, maybe it's kind of the same.
Someone would guess.
Right.
So with that, what is the foundation, and you feel that with the sampling, what's the foundation of healthy soil? Where do you think that the quote unquote healthy soil, how do we get to that point?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, but it all, it definitely all begins with taking the soil sample as far as we're concerned.
Right.
And I think that, you ask most anybody out there, they're going to agree with you. We're seeing much more of a movement towards soil health, I think, than we've seen in the past decade or so. People our growers are really starting to realize that that's a real concern. And then, the other thing that I think is a big driver for, it's not here yet, but don't doubt that we're going to continue to see more regulation and whatnot about what you can put out and when and how you do it. So,
and I think that's why it's going to be important to know the accuracy of what's going out and how it's going out and why it's going out, to be able to take the samples and then, bring them together and collaborate with your agronomist or with your consultant, figure out the best methods to attack.
Exactly. And with commodity prices getting a little tighter, we're going to have to squeeze every little penny that we can We don't have $7 corn going on right now. And, how much better can you collect your data and really utilize? I don't think we've even gotten close to seeing the true utilization of the technology that's downstream from your soil sample.
Exactly. So we're here today with Jeff Burton, AutoProbe.ag, unique tool to be used to be able to collect samples in your field to get a better precision. And that's where it's headed. It's data, it's precision, it's accuracy. And, if you're tired of sending your grandkids or some local high school kids out to jump on a metal probe and take some samples and get more accurate, I think this is the way it's moving to be able to do that.
It is. And I'm glad to be able to be here with you and talk about the fact that we're now in the stages of where we're ready to be selling these to farmers and agronomists and consultants and really expand their data collection.
Sure. You have the opportunity, if you want to log on to AutoProbe.ag, you can contact us as well at biovant.com. We can get you the information for Jeff, his business associates, to better service you. Really key for those agronomists that are out there consulting several thousands of acres. I think this is going to be a great tool for your customer base to be able to get more precision and allow their inputs to go farther and that dollar to go farther. So we're just going to take a minute or so time here, just a little short break, and we'll be coming up with Ben Elliott with Cardinal Ag Services. Jeff, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thanks for staying with us. We're here today, Biovant's Best Practices Exchange. We really want to offer the growers, the viewers, the ability to inform themselves about new techniques and new tools in the industry. We're here today with Ben Elliott with Cardinal Ag Services. And Ben and I met about 4 years ago. We really didn't have any business relations until the last year, and it's been a good connection that we made, and Ben offers a lot of soil agronomy and microbiology additions to what our products and different angle to our company. But Ben, you have a company that's based out of Illinois. Do you mind to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the industry?
Yeah, well, I grew up on a farm in West Tennessee, and I can remember even at an early age kind of questioning why my dad would do some of the things he would do, and maybe an example would be year-to-year fertility would never change, and I'd wonder why that was. So from an early age, I always had questions about why we did what we did on the farm and how we could get the best out of that. But I went to college at the University of Tennessee and Bethel University in West Tennessee, and went to work for a formulator for a few years and really gained a lot of good, valuable experience through that. But my passion was always to be out in the dirt and see what we could change as far as making dirt into good, healthy soil. And that's kind of the path I've been on for the last several years now. And it's really working out in that we are able to bring a package of goods or a package of services to growers now that I think as an industry, it's been difficult for us to put together for a true understanding of what all is actually out there for data collection and what they're doing fertility-wise.
Right.
Cardinal Ag Services is broken into two different divisions. We have a financial services division that offers precision risk management policies, and we also offer some lending options and stuff like that on the financial side. But then the agronomy side is pretty obvious what we do. We do soil and tissue analysis, water analysis, fertility analysis, manure analysis, and do everything we can to bring all of the information to bear on a farmer's decision that's possibly out there for him to use. Then we can tie it all back together through the financial side with the precision ag products that he may already have. And that's one thing we run into. A lot of guys have precision equipment on their farm, but they use it just simply to make their tractor drive straight.
Right.
And there's so much more that it can do for them. And especially when we're talking about products such as what Biovante offers, it can really make the difference. That technology can really close a gap that's hard for them to grasp right now in a lot of situations.
So, I think it's important, just like Jeff was speaking earlier, the collection is key. We have to know where we're starting. And for you, a consultant or agronomist or anybody giving out any type of recommendations, even before it gets to the point where you're treating the seed or you're looking at in-furrow products or fertilizers, you have to know what that data is. And then it better services you, so that way you can better service your clientele. And, overall, what do you feel that are some emerging types of soil testing that you're currently seeing, and which ones do you really like? Which ones do you like to see, and you advise your growers to go after and look at implementing into their operation?
Well, in all honesty, it's a practice issue more so than maybe a test or a particular test to run. I want to be sure that growers are testing on a regular cycle. I want to be sure that they're looking at their macronutrients as well as some of the micros through that, because we have to assess the relationship of those micros to the macros and other conditions we might need to address in the soil profile. One test that I like to do now, which not a lot of people do really, is look at that plant profile and soil profile around the emerging plant as it spikes through the ground, and look at maybe an establishing biological profile or life structure that's going on around where we're using starter fertility products more often, or where we're doing strip till practices and soil temperatures become an issue. We have to remember that a good example of something to watch is for phosphate available or phosphorus availability, because we try to plant corn early and earlier. Phosphorus is generally tough to be available in cooler soils, so those starters that are phosphorus laden are becoming more and more important for that early vigor. And if we're not testing to see what's going on there, then it's kind of a crapshoot as to what happens in the end game. So testing needs to start earlier as far as I'm concerned, especially with the more progressive farmers. And it needs to run a regular cycle all the way through the growth into harvest.
And that's one of those keys when you look at soil samples and you feel like you make the bulk inputs as far as NPK and some micros, and even now with technology, the way that we're putting things in the row, totally tubular. Ag Excel has the Y splits, Y not splits, and you're running in the row. If we put product out and we just forget about it, and then we go throughout the year, we control weeds, we do fungicide applications, we really truly never know if that either poly blend, poly-ortho blend, or 100% ortho blend was truly giving us the best bang for our buck. And I think that's why it's so key that even if it is as early as spiking, especially if we're running micronutrient packages in the row, we're looking at sulfate chelated, citric acid chelated, EDTA chelated micros. Those cover a wide range of pHs. And when a grower makes a decision to buy a product from whatever retailer or company, and he simply buys off a price alone, that price doesn't always translate into the result. And we don't know that unless we're out there taking the samples. We don't know that if we're out there and sending those samples off to the lab to figure out, did my micronutrient package plus my liquid fertilizer, how did that translate to middle of the season before I went from vegetative to reproductive? Where was those peaks? Where was those valleys? You don't know that unless you're taking the sampling.
Yeah, and obviously, Chris, a lot of the times, through Mother Nature's regular cycle, once we establish plant growth, if we get into a cool wet condition or a hot dry condition or a hot wet condition, the needs of that plant can change within a small window of time. And if we're not really watching what's going on consistently throughout that growth of the plant, then we don't understand the impacts of, one, the fertility inputs that we select, and two, the effects of weather on those fertility inputs as the plant changes needs.
Sure.
So we have to watch that very closely.
Well, you know, when you get the demographics, you talk about guys in the South, you move closer to the Midwest, and you go farther north. There's GDU, there's heat units that are required. So, I mean, the change from one vegetative stage to the next, that could be a 5 to 7, it could be a 3 to 5, depending upon what maturity of throughout the year of that plant. So, if you don't address the deficiency, if we're not out there sampling, I mean, sometimes you got 24, 48 hours,
Right.
and boom, you're going to the next stage.
Right.
And we know how it is. You cannot go back. You got to try to stay ahead of the game.
Right.
And that's where our yields, that's where breaking the yield barriers, that's where getting more involved with your crop as it's growing. That's where we need growers to take the initiative, which many are. Now they're starting to find different tools to be able to do that. Take the initiative, take tissue sampling, take soil sampling, even in season, take soil sampling. See how those anhydrous or the urea or the UAN applications, how that is playing out throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on analysis, what do you read other than, I know this is a broad question, but what do you read other than just NPK? And why do you feel that's important, not only for you as consulting the grower, but also the grower to understand and know?
Well, Chris, that's a broad question, but it's also a loaded question too. I'll explain it like this. Many of the times when I go out to do a testing series, if I don't have recent soil data to start my testing series on, we have to establish that. And that's where utilizing, equipment or practices like you've talked about with Jeff earlier is getting the best consistent sample across a farm so that you can establish a baseline of where you need to be and what you need to look at. So I can't say that in every soil test I look for calcium levels as opposed to phosphorus and potassium levels. It all depends on that farm, the history of that farm, and where it is as we stand today. Sure. So that's why it becomes more and more important for farmers to establish a baseline of knowledge, because you don't know where you're going unless you know where you are.
Right.
And if we get a consistent sampling established and a consistent set of data for these growers to look at, then it's much easier for me as an agronomist to go out and say, hey, here's why I'm suggesting this. This is why your farm you need to add DAP or potash or elemental fertilizers or micronutrients. It all depends on what that base set of data tells us, and we have to be able to go out and get that accurately.
Right, right. Accuracy is going to be key, and I mean, we've talked about it before being together. The way things are moving with precision planting, and now with planters being able to plant low hybrid and high population hybrids, even in the same field, based off of soil types and the variable rate applications. Data collection is key. It's going to be very important moving forward. What Jeff and them are being able to accomplish with the soil sampling, and then throughout the year, that's going to be key. What are some things, though, as far as breaking yield barriers, what is one key or one thing that you could tell the listening audience from soil samples or throughout the year? What do you feel is one thing that they need to look at when trying to look at breaking yield barriers?
Well, starting with a point you made a second ago about a regular analysis or a regular test being conducted throughout the vegetative growth of crops. When it comes to tissue sampling, I think it's just been very easy for people to go out and see a problem spot in a field and take a tissue sample and address that problem spot one time throughout vegetative growth. Ideally, if you want to really keep on top of what the changing conditions are out there, you really need to sample about every 2 weeks in a growing crop. And this is with tissue sampling. You also want to be sure that you sample the ground at some point during that tissue sampling again, so you can have a comparative study of where the ground is and where the plant is at the same time in given conditions.
Because there again also is key, especially the majority we're going to discuss primarily about corn, but when you look at corn, there's certain grain field, there's certain needs of nitrogen, as that, once you start to hit B12, B10 going into tassel period, there's going to be a spike that we're going to need to make sure there's a surplus of nitrogen available. And if we're not doing something sooner and we're waiting, there could be 20, 30 bushels we left on the table.
Right. We have to remember in corn crops, especially that corn makes its decision by the fourth collar. So we need to get everything in there to that corn crop by the fourth collar to support this vegetative growth that's coming behind that decision that it's made. So after we've gotten everything from the emergence into that fourth collar delivered to that plant and got as much vigor established in the growth of that plant, then we have to support that plant's decision from then on.
Sure.
So the idea that there's usually not a need for inputs after V4 or after that fourth true collar, that's just really not accurate. There are times later on in the growth through the tasseling stage that, maybe you will need to have an input go into that corn to affect that growth cycle and affect the grain field, just like you mentioned. But the other part of what we're starting to pay most attention to is the biological life structures in the ground. Granted, there's not a lot of protocols out there that are exactly accurate, but the market is really paying a lot of attention to biological inputs and manipulating biological life or putting an accessory to biological life in there as part of the full system of plant growth. So we're looking more and more at that every day. And with Cardinal Ag Services, we look at it early on. So we want to establish testing cycles in the fall after harvest. And we want to look at that time too. And if we have to go into a digester program, we can maybe custom fit a digester program behind corn so that you get more bang for your buck in return of nutrients to the soil that way. The other side of it is during growth, when we use starters and when we input biologicals like Biovante's chemistries, then during that growth cycle, we want to look right next to the crop in the row and under the root structure and really around the root structure to assess what that biological life system is doing. And even though there may not be a standardized test in the country across many different labs, we look at it from a point of counting populations and seeing if the populations are staying where they are, or they're growing, or are they going away.
Right.
And that gives us a good idea that we're either treating the biological life systems right or we're not.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're changing things to affect that a little bit differently as we can.
Sure. If anybody has paid attention to Biovante and kind of been on our site and looked at some of our biological products, you'll know that we really look at fertility. We look at inputs such as herbicides and fungicides, insecticides, and tillage, weather. That all influences biological activity. I wanted to address it. You were talking about looking at how those inputs, macro, secondary nutrients, and trace minerals, how those are influenced. How many times do we see a soil sample, and we read the soil sample, you go throughout the tissue, you take tissue samples throughout the year, and then the end result is obviously some type of yield that we get off of that crop, whatever crop it is, the yield in production. But once we start to put in biologicals, we start to see that our yield averages begin to increase because we're supplementing what synthetics cannot bring to the table, allowing our soil profile to now become a manufacturing facility in the soil. We have in our biological products, look at BioRed. BioRed is one that allows surface bacteria to set on the surface to capture atmospheric nitrogen. We have those that get into the surface of into the soil and hold ammonia ions, convert ammonia ions. Ammonia goes to ammonium and ammonium to nitrate form. And nitrate is the most uptaken form of nitrogen that the plant will use. But learning whether it's anhydrous or whether it's urea or UAN, those are all key in how the biologicals collaborate with those inputs. But we can start to see our soils begin to make us money by putting in a true biological. And that's the buzzword. That's what things are happening right now and the discussions going on. What are you seeing? What do you feel is the valuable aspects of biologicals being used for a grower, whether he's dryland, whether he's irrigated? How can a true biological, such as BioRed, come into play to begin to make him money?
Well, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that we like Biovante focuses on a holistic picture of biological life. So we're looking at both anaerobes and aerobes.
Right.
And we tend to try to bridge that gap. I have to remind people that it takes a long time for these life systems to naturally replace and return to a very vigorous state. But in the end game, they all bring about making maybe nutrients that are locked up in the soil profile plant available into plant available forms. And sometimes it does not take but a very minuscule amount of plant available nutrition to affect the difference in the yield you see through the crop. So we can't think about this from the more material we add, the better off we are, because it's all about an efficient system. It's all about bringing balance from the aerobic and anaerobic side of microbes, knowing what we have in the soil that may be locked away or sequestered that we can break free and make available, and not that it's going to happen in one application.
Sure.
There's no magic bullet here. This is just sensible science going into our soils.
Right.
And we have to take this with a systematic approach and do things incrementally to increase and improve upon making soil locked nutrients available to our plants, returning plants and biomass to nutritional form back to our soil. Infiltrating and increasing water holding capacity is a very important part of this. And also, when you increase water holding capacity and you increase biological efficiencies, you tend to see things like soil capillarity change and more oxygen and CO2 movement through the soil profile. And like I said, it's not, you're not going to walk out one day and see your soil bubbling or flashing off something. It just takes very small changes in that biology.
And that's what I want to talk about. 96% of what a plant needs is going to come from Mother Nature: hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. The other 4% that we're dealing with is what we as companies and fertility companies really get to advise the grower on, to say, listen, 2.7 of that 4 is NPK. 1.3 are the secondary and trace minerals. So we have 4% that we get to manipulate somehow, some way. Are we doing that efficiently? Are we allowing that to do efficiently? If we were able to make the 96% work a little bit more efficient, and that's done through biologicals. You start to look at the Krebs cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle, mineralization. Everything that comes through functionality has to cycle through the soil.
Right.
And that soil, whether it is quote unquote healthy or unhealthy, is driven by biological activity. And that's where I think moving forward, not only have we started to look at it with the seed companies, they're putting on inoculants. This started several years back. The very first understanding that we had about any biological was mycorrhizal fungi. And that was one of those things that helped us get the branching and the movement of the root system, and allowing us to have a larger capacity of a root mass, and then became azotobacters and rhizobiums. And of course, we know legumes, they fix their own nitrogen. And we're starting to learn more and more in the industry about the importance. And that's where I want to, the viewer to understand is bacteria and fungi are great, and they're huge in the functionality and the benefits of the soil. But if that's all we focus on, if that's the only thing that we look at is just bacteria and fungi, what's going to happen is we're going to create a major imbalance in the soil. The thing is, you are what you eat. If you just eat one thing all the time, then you're going to be nutrition deficient. You're going to have other symptoms come up, whether you start to grow another ear, or your hair starts to abnormally grow, something weird.
Or a big belly.
Hey, something happens.
So you're saying I need to quit eating
There's
bread.
a reaction, yeah. So, we can't focus just on bacteria and fungi. And, that's the thing. Biovante products, when you look at BioRed and BioFlex, BioGold, you're going to purchase a product that's not like it on the industry. And I don't want to give you this salesman pitch right here on this, because I'm sure everybody hears this. It's something that's different. But the thing about it is, you have to look at, outside of earthworms and the natural life that's in the soil, you have to look at actinomycetes, algae, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. Those 5 major functional groups need to operate at its most efficient capacity. And there are certain standards as which poundages of each of those should be in a healthy a healthy
Right.
soil. This is not something that Biovant just created or just thought up.
Right.
This is actually something that comes from the universities. Universities understand and realize we need poundage of this group, and so on and so forth. If we just focus on fungi, that's great. We're going to see some benefits. But over a period of time, that fungi is going to become so saturated that now it's going to start eating the bacteria. It's going to start eating the actinomycetes, the algae, the protozoa, and then we have no life except for just fungi alone.
Right.
And that's where we create the imbalance. And it's important to look at the whole system approach. And that's what we're being able to do with more precision, with the probing and taking the samples, and then being able, as a community of farmers, as a community of ag consultants, get together for the greater sake of the community, the farming community, get together and say, this is what we're seeing. This is the improvements that we're understanding. What are you guys hearing? What is happening? And that's where this Biovant best practices exchange, that's what we're trying to focus on. We're trying to bring information to the farming community, not just simply about our products, but that will better help the farming community as a whole. So we're going to take just a few minutes here, and we'll be right back to continue. If you have any questions that you would like answered, feel free to type those in and let us know. Otherwise, we'll be back and discuss some more topics. All right, we're back. Going to take some questions, some different topics that have come in, talking about primarily, going to look at, Jeff, what's some resistance that you're finding right now in the industry? Obviously change, any type of change is hard.
Why are you taking my answers?
Sorry.
No, actually, that is truly one of the biggest aspects of it. You know, we introduced this machine to folks, and when they see it, it's a no-brainer. But the resistance to how they've done things in the past, it's been an amazing experience to me to see how.
But it's something Granddad did. It's something.
Well, I understand. It's the way we've done it. It's just the way we've done it, and that's what we face. I do see that the mindset is changing. You know, we've seen in the last 5 years to the last decade, you know, all of this technology come to the farm when it comes to positioning and variable rate and implementing that on the farm. That there's more of a dialogue and a conversation around, you know, how do we make it even better? And I think that's more so now than ever, and we're going to continue to see that with commodity prices.
Sure. You know, looking at the sampling and the importance of the sampling, you know, Ben, the biggest thing is, you know, you got a guy who's got a low CEC, he's got somewhat acidic environment, he's got low organic matter. What's the value? I mean, I could answer this, but I want to get your input. The value of true organic matter and the ability to be able to raise that. By raising that organic matter, what are we as a community, from production, from health, gaining from being able to raise that?
Well, again, Cardinal Ag Services looks at this from a 3-point perspective. One is water efficiency and water holding capacity. 2 is going to be biological efficiency as well as fertility efficiency. That's point number 3. So when we talk specifically about organic matter, what we're talking about is obviously the dead, dying, and decaying material that is in the ground, and it's very difficult to raise that in especially low acid soils and low CUC soils. So we have to implement some out of the box practices that could be cover cropping, that could be maybe a litter program or something like that to have an immediate increase of organic matter. But it also comes back full circle to the biological life structure in the soil. If we're just adding 1 or 2 components of that 5-group system that we actually need to bring into balance there, then that turn to organic matter is going to be just as slow. We're not really doing anything to improve the efficiencies of that. So again, going forward, the biological agronomy that's becoming more and more of an interest to people are ways to affect that change quicker and put a more hardy organic matter together so that we don't lose it as fast and increase CECs.
And I was watching online, USDA, there was a gentleman with USDA, and he was talking about this span of how we can raise organic matter by 1%. And based off of just his information that he was given, they were looking at a 15-year span. With cover crops, as of right now, that's been one of those topics, cover crops, and then selection of the cover crops and how we use them, how we kill them, and how that benefits the overall health of the soil. 15 years, though, I mean, that's dramatic. We've got to come together as a community, a farming community, and figure out we can't. In 15 years, we're going to be looking at 2030. Our needs and our demands are going to be so high that we got to find that span and somehow come together and get that to a lower lifespan to where we can now start to see increases within 3 years, 5 years. We did some studies this last year, 2014, with just simply the biologicals alone, with our biological dietary supplement and our sugars from Biomate. We were able to look at some soil samples within a 5-month span, being able to raise those by 0.2 to 0.3. One field that we had 0.3. So, I mean, that was in 5 months. What can we do over a year period of time? But you know how it is. Ben, you've been there. This is a microwave society. We're all about right now, we need immediate. And that's a prolonged, somewhat of a delayed gratification of getting results in 2 years, 3 years. But like we're talking about, breaking the barriers of the mindsets of what granddad did, what dad did. In order for us as a farming community to increase our production, we got to bring in new technologies. We got to break the mind barrier of just staying stuck in our ways. That's what they refer to as insanity, Jeff. You ever been insane?
I've tried doing the same thing over and over and over again and thinking I'm going to get a different result. Is that where we're going there? Yes, I've been insane.
So we got to break that insanity barrier. And I think, coupled with our products and what's happening in the farming community, there's no silver bullet. We've all got to have a piece of the pie, not just a piece of the pie of the money, but a piece of the pie to bring our knowledge and bring our information and technologies to the table. So that way the farming community, whether you're in Georgia or you're in Oregon or you're in Indiana, we can all be successful. What are some of the comments that your people are giving back to you?
Yeah, so naturally, just right off the bat with the growers, when they see this thing run and they're used to either how they've done it or seen it done in the past, they instantly understand how this is much more superior to how it's been done in the past. We worked with ag retailers up in Iowa, and I've got a quote from one of them right here, Will Woodruff, who's at a CPS location manager in Boone, Iowa. And he says that their precision farmers really like it because it takes so many cores automatically. You don't just get a core from a point in a grid, you get core samples from all over the grid. We know the more cores we can take, the more representative that sample is going to be. Mm-hmm. So, this is what he's telling, the Midwest Corn and Soybean Production Guide is published there. So that's the feedback that they're getting, and it's fun. We're really now moving into this stage where we're dealing more directly with the growers themselves and getting that feedback. Where in the past, as we've been in the development stage, we've been a step away from them. So the reaction that we're getting is excellent at this point in time.
Great. Ben, with the analysis, I think it's important. We got about 15 minutes here, but to look at what are some things that you feel going on in industry that somewhat crippling the industry to the point that in order for us as a whole to do better as far as yield production is concerned, obviously, the products that Biovante brings, but not just biologicals, but in general, what are some ways, some techniques? I'm big into systems. I'm big into programs. There's not a cookie cutter way to get this done. Anybody who sits in an office or tells you this is what you need to produce higher yields, yeah, we might have a game plan, but the plan has to change. And that's the farming community looking over just the last 3 years. If you're not able to change or adapt to change, you're going to have some major problems,
Without a doubt.
and you're going to be losing yield. You're going to be behind the 8 ball. And so moving forward, I'm big into programs, and I think that's what you're talking about with the sampling, tissue sampling throughout the year. How does the program aspect get us more yields?
Well, I can think of setting this up 2 ways, Chris. That one, the technology, a lot of people already have in place. They just maybe don't understand
Like what?
how to fully utilize that. And a good, for instance, is a lot of John Deere guys have tractors that have nice new 2630 monitors in them, and all they do is make them drive straight. When that monitor and that system is so much more accurate now just than it was 5 years ago, they can turn that system into a very value-added tool for their grower, for their farming operation.
Mm-hmm.
But another part of it too is just like for today, I really want people to take away from this that this is a session of information to kind of expand what we've experienced into what you probably would like to adapt to your practices. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a lab example. A lot of times I see labs running just a Malic 3 extraction and giving me a phosphorus number. Well, Malic 3 is the weakest extraction, so therefore I know there's probably going to be a correction factor of about 70% of phosphorus content in the ground. That test alone causes us to maybe over-apply a product such as that. So I want farmers to begin to think about that and really start seeking information like we have here today, to get the ball rolling, to get the wheels turning, and seeking out this information, because only with the understanding of the tools that they may already have in their hand can they start really affecting change in their soil, which that's where yield starts.
Yeah.
Yield starts in the soil. And some information that I leave out with everybody is don't kind of use an analogy as if you're talking about a child that was just born. When that child's born, you don't lay all of its food and water for the rest of its life out in front of it and expect it to do the best it can do when that child's life expectancy is 70 years.
Yeah.
We have to do that every year with plants. And every year we do that, so many growers tend to throw everything they can at a crop and expect the end game of that crop to be as much as it can do.
Yeah.
And that's just simply not the case. And again, this is all information that I hope we get some wheels spinning today so that guys start looking into advanced practices and how to adapt what's already there on their farm. They would be very surprised if they just could think about this and assess where they are, equipment and land-wise, to the difference that could be in their farm 5 years from now.
Sure. This is why it's here, where we title it as Best Practices Exchange. This is an exchange of ideas, it's an exchange of successes, it's an exchange of failures, how we learn from those failures to make a success, turn lemons into lemonade. And that's what we have to do as a farming community. One of the things, talking about change, I got to hear David Hula speak at a meeting last year. And for the longest time, Ben, it's when you go out and you look at corn production, you look at the end of the year, once it's starting to get black layer, the corn starts to dent. And that was just one of those things that it was just a common thing throughout the industry. Corn naturally dents. And David brought up the topic at the beginning of the year working with us. He said, I'm going to move in such a way to try to get the corn not to dent. And I know that one kernel, if I can make it bulkier, bigger, heavier, what does that do? It raises my yields. Mm-hmm. And David, used a lot of the Biomate product that we have, and that's 4 sugar complexes with 2 different strands of bacteria that aid in carbohydrates and energy. And he was able to implement that, whether that was pre-plant, in the row, side dress, in with his UAN, foliar applications, pretty much every time he's going across the field. And he testifies to this to the point that he saw less denting on his grain, that he hit the record in 2013 of 454. So those are just topics and ideas that, you know, breaking the norm, breaking the barrier. You know, maybe we get 2-3 years into this, Jeff, and this is becoming a norm for guys.
Let's hope.
And
let's hope that we need it. We need it because, you know, it all, I think we've said it several times, it comes back to the soil, and it all begins in the soil. And, you know, the data that we're pulling now from a soil sample, there are several factors that can skew that, but having a good, consistent sample, I mean, you've got to start with the best possible collection that you can. And, you know, if you're out doing it by hand, more power to you. Just be consistent with what you're doing. You know, I'm a fan of what we've got, but no matter how you're doing it, consistency is key.
Sure. You know, I'm gonna look at the website just for a few minutes if we can. I want to show some things. You know, we have you can contact us at any time to get with Jeff, get with Ben. Collectively, we like to work with you. But as far as our products is concerned, I really want to discuss some of the products that we've talked about. Has been the BioRed and the BioGold. That has been our soil application of aerobic and anaerobic microorganisms. You know, that's with and without the presence of oxygen. So, you know, you could potentially look at some extremes between drought and then too much water, flooding. We don't want those to happen. But the good thing about the BioGold and BioRed technologies is that we have aerobic and anaerobic microorganisms that still function in those extremities. One of our biggest things that I really encourage growers to look at is our seed treatments. Our seed treatments are really turning to give a great return on investment, 4-to-1, as much as sometimes 10-to-1 return on investment. Pentalex Aqua is a great product to put on a seed, primarily where we're looking at corn seed on that product, whereas when we started getting to legumes, we really switch and look at the BioFlex product. That's a biological inoculant. Pentalex Aqua is more of a synthetic material. Overall, the first 30 days, the breaking that seed coat and starting the germination, starting the root initiation, starting to dormancy break of that seed is so key in how it gets off to growing effectively. And you can see here, there's a picture. This was put on some wheat. We had the Biomate, the BioFlex, and BioGold and Assist 45 were put on the soil. But just the overall root mass, the root structure, you can see the corn picture there a little bit down. You look at the color of the stalk. You got the plants on the left. That ended up to be a 14 bushel difference at the end of the year for that grower, simply with the BioFlex product. And some guys say, listen, I can't put seed treatment on my seed. I don't have the opportunity. The co-op won't do it. I don't have a seedsman that will put that on. We can put product in the row. It's a different plan of attack. It's a different way to approach that. But if you're looking to break some yield barriers, I encourage you as a grower, seed treatments have got to become a must moving forward. We feel like we have a strong presence and profitable return on investment with our seed treatments, no matter what the crop is. We can look at cotton, we can look at certain vegetables, corn and rice. Seed treatment's key, also in the row applications. You can also view on our website some video successes, hear from some of the growers that have been using the product. These are the Stroh brothers out in Oklahoma. They were able to achieve some out-of-the-box results for such an area demographically that doesn't see good results. I mean, you're talking about some of the reddest dirt you've ever seen out in Oklahoma. Back in 2013, Perry Galloway was able to hit an Arkansas record for that year. We've been able to work with David Hula, and we've been able to work with some of the high 2014, some of the national and world record growers in the NCGA were able to achieve some high yields with our products. And whether you're not in the NCGA or whether you're just, looking for an overall 3-year, 5-year increase on your farm average, I know we have the products available with Biovante to help you on your farm. And as I say, if it's not a seed treatment, it might be an in-furrow application. If it's not an in-furrow application, it could be a supplement over the top with your herbicide application. Ben, at the beginning of this last year, we were able to get together and talk about some of the things that we were doing together. And I thought, I was going to give this great presentation of something new that I was doing in 2014 that was going to shock you. And the cool thing about it was when we both sat down, we showed each other our paper about it at the same time, and it was the same concepts. When I say same concepts, it was different, out of the box thinking. We did some carbon studies. We looked at implementing more carbon to the plant. And how mine started was I wrote a paper back in college, back in 2003, of a doctor who added more carbon. This was in 1947. He started doing work of putting more carbon to the plant. There was a doctor in 1967 backed it up. They were looking at corn, cotton, rice, soybeans, peanuts, alfalfa, tomatoes. And so I thought, you know what, if they can do this in the lab, we got to some way be able to do this in the field. And so I knew from our biologicals what energy and what carbon and what nitrogen fixing capabilities were there. So we coupled that with a dietary supplement to feed those microbes. And, that in 2014, our trials at V6 just by itself, nothing else for the fertility, but at V6 on that application, we had a 30 bushel increase across our averages. And whenever you and I sat down, you were doing some work with pre-plant nitrogen as well as some side dress nitrogen. And we both had the same concept. I was approaching it from foliar. You were doing it more soil-based. And to be able to sit down and see, man, this is some different things that nobody really else is addressing. You don't probably get these in the ag retail places. You don't get these concepts. You don't get these discussions. Not that it's not happening there, but in order for us to break these barriers, we got to look at the industry as a whole. We got to find new ways. Ben, just briefly, what are some things that you saw from that carbon study? I know you worked, did 5 trials on some pioneer plots. What are some things that you saw that you can bring into your?
Well, a couple of the things that we observed were, and you have to remember, I thought about this concept from the idea of we've got water, we've got carbon dioxide, and then if you have plants or microbes that are breaking those into individual components that are reassembled through the plant into sugars for energy and food source and photosynthesis and the citric acid cycle. So one thing that I observed that was really interesting to me was early on in crop establishment, we saw a big spike in the amount of carbon burst in the ground that was available to the plant. And also we were looking at how much carbon we added and then removal rates from there translated through our yield. And we always, in every test, we had a positive result. Now, some were greater than others depending on our carbon source and depending on exactly how much weather was interfering with that, whether it was cool or hot or wet or dry. So the positives were all the way across the plot, but where it stood out the most was where we supplemented some of the microbial activity. And that really shows a lot of promise in varying soil types and varying soil conditions. So this was all done on very rolling hill farms, and so we have nutrient scavenging places where there's an abundance of something or some residual in the ground that doesn't exist 100 feet north or south or east or west of it.
Right.
So we got to look at this across a long profile of soil and different conditions all at the same time. And it really proved that we were headed in the right direction. We just have to understand our data a little
And if
more.
you want to discuss this, like I say, call in, email, we can get Ben the information. I really do appreciate your time and being able to watch this. Jeff Burton with AutoProbe Technologies, autoprobe.ag. Ben with Cardinal Ag Services, we can get you his information. I'm Chris Masters with Biovante. We really do appreciate this. We hope that you found this informational. We look forward to doing more. Please email us in if there's a topic or discussion that you would like to see addressed. We'd love to address that for you. Thanks again very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.